First question for the panel. What role does the government play in the startup ecosystem? And this could be locally, it could be the US, it could be international. Jeep, would you like to start?
Yep. So probably I'm gonna give some perspective from international countries as well, including Asia and Europe, because I know Melissa's here, and you can chime in on that. So first of all, let me step back a little bit, if that's okay. Okay.
Perfect.
I think that the role of building technology-driven venture capital ecosystem, obviously, is not just the government, right? A lot of countries, I mean, including Silicon Valley, if you look at the history of Silicon Valley, it was actually driven or created by private sector, okay? Having said that, in order to leapfrog or catch up, especially from international countries, the governments can also play a key role. Now, I've also noticed that when the government decided to invest directly in startup companies, technology-driven startup companies, they may not have the expertise to do that, right? Because the government, so as an economist, we like to see the government as sort of like the catalyst and not crowd out the private sector. So some of the countries that I really observe and I really like, for example, in Britain, what I think is really smart about them is instead of investing directly in startup companies or pre-IPO companies, the government actually not wanting to crowd out the private sector, and then they allocate small funds to invest in venture capital funds, okay? And not, second or third or fourth time VC funds. They invest in first-time fund managers so that the fund managers can use that small capital as an anchor capital and then go out and raise additional private sector capital and then invest in startup companies. So that is one of the roles that I've seen that I really like. I mean, having said that, different countries or different governments can also invest directly in startup company. The most successful cases are some of the technologies that has IP security or takes a long time, especially in deep tech, to develop and commercialize those kind of technology. Then those would be some of the roles that the government can get involved. Instead of just investing directly in any startup company, because I view the role of the government to be the catalyst to really help spur and create the ecosystem that should be run by the private sector. And they kind of like, okay, let me help boost that up. So that's just some of the examples.
Ignacio, Melissa, do you have more to add to that?
Yeah, so I mentioned before that we provide funding. So within the Department of Homeland Security, we recognize that there's a lot of innovation that the federal government wasn't taking advantage of. And part of that was, it's our fault, right? We are the slow sales cycles. We make it challenging to even understand what our pain points are. So I designed the program. I'm based out here in the Bay Area, and I'm from the Bay Area originally too, so I get it. And so what we did was design the program to lower the barrier of entry for startups, particularly early stage companies, to identify whether or not their technologies have a good application to a DHS mission area. And so we provide that non-dilutive up to $2 million of funding over 4 phases over 24 to 36 months. So we're typically looking for early stage startups that are building product that are on a commercial roadmap. We're not asking companies to pivot into government. We're looking to partner and provide non-recurring engineering expenses to build in features that are applicable to DHS. And so that way you can see over the course of those 24 to 36 months, partnering with our end users to shape your product so that by the time your product reaches market, we can actually buy that technology from the commercial market. And we're not interested in taking any of the intellectual property either. I have no need for your IP. I want to see the product be usable by our end users and for them to be able to buy it. And so I totally empathize and understand the viewpoint of the government not necessarily being an investor, but we're providing kind of funding to help shape products so that those technologies meet our needs as well.
Ignacio?
Well, I think I might want to go like 2 steps back and think about like how do you create an ecosystem in a country, and it's it's not an easy thing. I mean, you cannot copycat your way into being in the next Silicon Valley because you just cannot do it. Each country has its own peculiarities, and so it's not something easy to do. It takes a lot of time. But I think if I have to mention 3 things of how the role the government can play, it's regulation, it's education, and capital. That's what Jeep mentioned, and you mentioned as well. And I think you have to work intensely on those in order to create an ecosystem that allows entrepreneurship to thrive and exist, actually. Because otherwise, it'd be very, very hard. If you don't have like the right set of rules, if you don't have like an educated population, and of course you don't have capital. So then, it will be very, very hard to create entrepreneurs or to have entrepreneurs that have the possibility to thrive. But also, I mean, you need and coming from Uruguay, we're a very small country, just 3.4 million people. But somehow we managed to have also the government lay the groundwork for entrepreneurs to be able to do their thing. And it's also about having great connectivity in the country, right? It's having all those things that the government, in a way, should take care of, and especially, and sometimes the view might be different if you come from like United States, and you might think that okay, that's something that private sector should do, but other countries might think, oh no, maybe that's the government's responsibility to take care of those things. So I think it's mostly regulation, education, and capital.
Of all the things you've mentioned, or not sure if you want to dive deeper on any one or just pivot a little bit, what government out there, what program have they implemented? What has someone else done? I know, Jeep, you touched a little bit on it with UK there, but what have they done that has really impressed you when working with the startup ecosystem?
I'm going to talk about Uruguay because it's the country I know the most.
There you go.
And we've been traditionally an agricultural country, but that has changed a lot in the past 20 years, I'd say. And so we have a very long-dated computer science program, like back from the 1960s, from the public university. And that has led to great things in the country. And we have a thriving IT services industry in the country. And now that's transforming slowly into like entrepreneurs. Instead of having their own software development company, they say, okay, maybe let's just do a product, right? Technology product. And because that allows like to scale better than doing just IT services. And so we started thinking outside of the box and thinking more regionally, and not only okay, let's do this product just for Uruguay because we're a very tiny market. And same thing as like what people say about Israel. They immediately think about going outside of the borders. So we're changing our mindset in that way as well. So yeah, I mean, we're now like having lots of entrepreneurs, and they are willing to take the risk to compete regionally and bring their products even to the U.S. and try to raise money here in America.
Melissa, Jeep?
So I would like to give an example now, different countries. So I talked a little bit about the UK. There are 2 other countries that create a lot of government push in Asia, okay? And that is Taiwan and also Singapore. And the strategy that they're going after is essentially, they ask themselves, what is the competitive advantage within the country? So for Taiwan, they realized that they used to be part manufacturers. They're really good in biotech, right? Semiconductor industry, right? So the way that the government tried to push is to leverage their own strengths, the country's strength, while expanding in the adjacent area. So they are doing essentially 2 things. One, they also invest in fund of funds. But there are some also conditions in those funds, right? So yes, I invest in VC, which is venture capital investment, but the VC should also consider investing in Taiwanese startups in this particular area, right? They also give grants to deep tech or biotech company in the form of non-dilutive grant, which means that Silicon Valley venture capitalists just love it because it's upside for us, right? Singapore is slightly different approach. Singapore has a lot of strengths, not just biotech and semiconductor, right? They also have medical research. They also have, green materials, climate tech area. So what do the governments do? They push every corner in the private sector and public sector. You may have heard of Temasek. You may have heard of a lot of other private venture capital funds that you don't even know that is actually backed by the state government. Obviously, they also have non-dilutive grant. They also encourage private venture capitalists to lead the round when investing in Southeast Asian companies, so that venture capitalists like us in Silicon Valley can follow, right? Because they would lead due diligence and so on. So these are some of the things that the international governments have done to really move the needle, just to get the private sectors around the world to understand about their country and their assets and the competitive advantages that they have.
Melissa, I'm not sure if you want to continue on this or, the next question I have, but feel free to keep with this question. How important do you think it is for governments to collaborate to open doors for companies that are interested in expanding? What's the government role in that?
Yeah, I think it's critical. I heard someone recently say, we need to collaborate the heck out of, and they used a different word, out of it. No, I think it's really, really important, right? Because we think it's, your government is, you expect a lot from your government. And so you expect those services and support and capabilities to be delivered to you in a manner that serves you, right? And if we, as the government, don't actually involve you in the process, whether you're a technology provider or developer, we're not going to understand how to actually deploy those capabilities. And so that's why I think it's huge for us to be out here connecting with startups, with VCs, with other governments, to collaborate and understand what some of those common areas where not only across international governments, what some of our common pain points are, but where have they found solutions? Where have solutions already been developed for the commercial sector that we should be leveraging and taking advantage of? And so I totally echo what you're saying, Jeep, and I love what Singapore is doing. We actually also partner with them quite a bit, and so I think that's huge. But I also think that the government's responsible for catalyzing a lot of what's out there. We think that within the government, we're able to take some of the risk that some VCs or investors are less willing to, and so in some cases, we may actually invest or fund companies that we see could have great potential, but also see the fact that there needs to be a market out there, because it doesn't help us if a startup doesn't succeed. We need for those startups to be able to build product, deliver services, and be successful. And so that's why it's really important for me to make sure that we're working hand in hand with those companies, pairing them up with the end users to iterate on that product so that by the time it's out in the field, we know that it will meet our operators' needs.
Diving a little bit deeper there, where do you think the balance is between government regulation to kind of protect and secure versus to encourage innovation? Where do you think that balance is? We'll go the Consul General.
As a government official, I don't know if I should be answering this question. But my my take in general is that you shouldn't regulate stuff beforehand, because that's not going to be helpful very much towards having an innovative ecosystem. So there's always a balance and trade-offs, but yeah, that's kind of my take. It's you have to be careful about regulation and not go too deep into that before you know what you're actually regulating. Yeah.
I don't think there's really a straightforward answer to that question because it varies depending on what the ecosystem is, what technology there is. I know within DHS, we are hiring AI for our AI core, and a lot of that is to help inform policies, regulation, technologies that we're trying to push out there. And we need innovators to come into the government to help us understand where the innovation is.
Okay, so speaking of innovation coming to the government, how do these early stage companies actually get access to the government, access to the resources, access to the opportunities?
Essentially, for us, with my program, if you connect with me on LinkedIn, I basically flood my LinkedIn with those funding opportunities. I also share out any of the sister programs that are within the Department of Homeland Security, what those funding programs are, when they're funding things. So in terms of like becoming aware of them, just connect with me on LinkedIn or subscribe to our mailing list. There's a number of other government programs. I don't think that the government as a whole is the greatest at making it simple to see where our opportunities are. Within my parent organization, I asked them to create this like choose your own adventure booklet so that any entity, right? You could be a student, you could be someone who's a first-time founder still in your garage. Like, how do you know how to plug in, right? And so part of that is the government has a responsibility for making sure that we make it easier for you all to know how to find our opportunities.
Ignacio?
In our case, we've been developing for the past 2 years a great program called Uruguay Innovation Hub, where we're building a biotech accelerator. So we encourage companies, not just from Uruguay, but from around the world to come to Uruguay and discover what we have to give. And also a scheme of matching funds. So from that point of view, the government just matches the funds that VCs put into those startups. So I think it's a great way to just help startups and new entrepreneurs into just like at least try or just build their own business.
Jeep?
As a VC, I push startups a lot. So if they could have some sort of technology that they could receive grant, non-dilutive grant, or matching funds from the government, I would ask them when they came pitch to me, have you explored this area, right? Because having this kind of support actually goes a long way. One, obviously, financial returns, right? Creating, positive spillover, creating the new technology, create employment, and so on. But at the same time, they can also create a lot of impact on the community. So VCs have much higher incentive if startup companies receive grants from the government or matching funds, because it's an upside for us. And we also know that these are the kind of technology that they view important for the nations and for the ecosystem. So if we look at a cap table, and you have those kind of grants or either non-dilutive or dilutive grant, we actually consider them more than startups that just came to us, but you are in deep tech, you are in health tech, you were going to solve cancer problem, you have an AI, but you never explore this area. We're going to send you to the governments anyways, right? So that's kind of like from the private sector perspective.
Can I just add to that a little bit?
Go for it. I got a follow-up question for you.
Oh, okay.
Go.
Just to echo what Jeep said. I mean, not echo, but like to reinforce what she said. One of the startups that we funded early on, they came in as a pre-A company, and after our contract, they didn't necessarily get a government contract, but they got some other government contracts. I can't say who. And they're now 9 figures in government contracts and just raised their Series C with Goldman. So it helped them a lot, at least what they told us.
Sounds like they need an investment banker. Shameless plug. The few people that laugh know who I am in the audience. That's how I just figured it out right there. But Jeep, going back to what you said earlier about wanting to see government on the cap table, want to see that non-dilutive investment, do VCs ever go to their LPs with kind of that strategy of saying, yes, in my fund, we're really going to actively look for these government-backed companies because we're going to leverage the resources, the governments, that the capital they put in. Is that ever come up in conversations in the actual thesis?
All right, we are taping, all right? But okay, I'll tell you the secret. Yes, we look at that. Okay, and it's well, I should say that it depends on the technology as well. Not every single business idea or every single new technology is going to match the government interest. But if it is in deep tech, in health tech, in AI, that the governments try to push to create an ecosystem because it is our competitive advantage in the US or in Latin America, we would ask, so why didn't you explore, right? And the government, as you heard, usually they like to do the seed or pre-seed round. So if you are scaling after a round, it might be slightly harder to get the government involved because the government might see that, you can actually raise funds from the private sectors. Why are you coming back to us? Unless there's a strategic initiative. Okay, so yes, it depends. For example, if there is a long-lasting battery on the watch that can last, say, 10 years, and it can be used in military. Okay, for example, because they might not get the opportunity to charge the watch and whatever. So those kind of innovation, we would ask, okay, do you have the government as a partner or customer, or did you get some sort of grants if you have IP in those kind of technology? And if the answer is no, 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 and so then we're going to dig deeper. So who's your target market in those kind of business model, right? So that's how we work together in public and private sector. We want to make sure that the critical technology get built. We want to make sure that the private sector also are incentivized to invest in those areas.
So we have enough time for one more question for the panel. How do you see in the future, what do you envision that relationship between the private and public sector? And then also, if anyone here wants to contact you, post bombarding you once you get off the stage with questions. If anyone wants to contact you, what's the best way to go about doing that? But future of private and public sector, how do you envision it?
I've been thinking about this for a while, and I think the future will be around public goods, meaning environment, space exploration, and other things that only the government used to take care of, and now you can see more private companies working in these fields. Maybe just collaboratively with the government as well, but there you see more and more private companies like getting involved in this kind of fields, which range from as mentioned environment, security, defense, space exploration, and so many others. So that I think that's going to be what's coming in the relationship between government and private companies.
Melissa?
Yeah, I think it's already starting to happen. But where I think the future is a much closer collaboration between government providing funding and private sector providing capital. And I think we're seeing a lot of dual-use VCs out there that are supporting the types of technologies that the government needs, but also is bringing revenue in for companies. So I definitely am seeing those. And then on top of that, the international government space, I'm talking every week with a new international government, talking about our program, figuring out ways to partner, and having them stand up programs like mine in their countries as well. And so I think you're going to see more where there's a common set of pain points across the world, where that shows that market share of those types of companies to exist will help allow for more public good companies to be created.
Jeep?
Yep, I completely agree. So let's think specifically. Let's say climate tech. Okay, climate investment is a big issue, and a lot of countries pledge to achieve net zero by 2050. This is one of the most difficult investment from venture capital perspective because it's not just like software is eating the world. We need hardware, we need IP, we need deep tech, we need huge capital investment. So because VCs are, some of them are small firms, some of them are big firms, it's just not enough. The capital that we have in the ecosystem is not enough to drive the climate tech solution without the help from the government, right? Whether it may be tax incentive to locate manufacturing facilities. I mean, the list goes on. So I agree in terms of the public goods. I agree in terms of the close collaboration. And if anything, it might be even in the 5-10 years co-investment, not just grant, but co-investing to make sure that we drive towards the energy transition, manufacturing transition, and get ourselves into the new economy in the AI era.
And if anyone wants to connect with you, LinkedIn?
LinkedIn, Jeep Klein, feel free to send me a message, email me at Berkeley, email is okay.
All right. And let's give a round of applause for our panel, for the panelists. Let's stand up here and take a quick